Memory is one of the most important concepts in psychology. We all remember, from the worst moments of our existence to the very best. Memories allow us to develop a sense of individuality, of self. They also guide our expectations and actions and are the basis for adaptation and growth. However, and despite its obvious importance, few of us know what memories actually are, why they are important biologically, how they are created and retrieved. Well, in this video I will show you all of this. Welcome to the psychology of everything. Before we start, this is a rather interesting pine tree and its name is Rudolph. Obviously, I couldn't make a memory video without asking you to remember something, so remember this. All memories aren't created equal. One of the major types of memory is short-term memory, which consists in storing information for a short amount of time. Wow, this is so informative. Thanks, psychology of everything. For example, when you stay up all night cramming right before an exam and you forget everything just 2 minutes later. This type of memory usually lasts for about 1 minute. Other major type of memory is long-term memory, which can be divided into at least 2 different subtypes. One of them is called procedural memory. This usually refers to physical actions that are basically automatic and don't require conscious thought after you learn them, like riding a bike. There is also declarative memory. This type of memory is the one we usually think of when we consider memory. It consists of remembering dates, memorable past events, like when you watch the first Psychology of Everything video, or definitions of specific concepts. For the purpose of this video, you can just keep declarative memory on the back of your mind. Finally, before actually explaining what a memory is, it would be really important to understand its biological function. This may be pretty obvious, but human beings are the culmination of thousands of years of biological evolution, and we share a lot with other animals. One of those things we share is memory. Memories are absolutely necessary for animals to effectively adapt to their environment, to more accurately calculate their next move, and to maximize their chances of survival. This is kinda obvious. A lion can remember where he has previously found prey and return there more often than to barren and deserted lands. Elephants can remember where water was found in previous years and, in that way, can survive intense drought periods. Humans are a bit more nuanced. Sometimes we can remember a series of digits in a phone number, something that has absolutely no naturalistic connection, but we can't remember what we had for lunch 2 days ago. I honestly can't. Having considered some ways memories are important, what is actually a memory? Memory can be divided into 3 distinct phases: encoding, storage, and retrieval. Encoding refers to the creation of the memory, or, as it is usually referred to in scientific terms, the memory trace. This creation will be influenced by a number of factors. I'll give you some examples. One of them is attention. Of course, if you do not pay attention to information, it will be less likely to lead to the creation of a long-term memory trace. Importance. Information that is considered to be more relevant will be more accurately encoded. Emotion also plays a part. This tells us what influences memory creation, but not what it actually is, how it is actually created. First, understand that the scientific term for what an encoded memory is engram. The engram is, simply, the name giving to the physical existence, the substrate of a memory. Very basically, one of the building blocks of the brain and our nervous system are neurons, obviously. Neurons are very unique cells, as they're either resting or they are active. The goal of this activation and its subsequent electrical signal is communication. There are billions of neurons in the human brain, and they communicate through synapses. Synapses are the communication link between different neurons, and they transmit the information through electrical or chemical processes. Synapses are the physical basis of memory, so it's important that you remember them. For the purpose of this video, the small explanation suffices as long as you understand that synapses are the connectors between neurons. However, if you are interested in learning more about neurons in the brain in general, I recommend this video. Now that you have a very basic understanding of neurons and synapses, we can go back to talking about memory and the engram. Again, the engram is the physical substrate of memory. During the 1950s, this physical substrate was only hypothetical, as technological methods were not advanced enough to measure it. A particularly important proposition was made by Donald Hebb in a seminal work, The Organization of Behavior, published in 1949. Hebb proposed, and I'm tremendously oversimplifying this, that neurons that fire together wire together. More specifically, when two adjacent neurons activate at the same time, or when the activation of neuron A leads to the activation of neuron B, their communication link becomes stronger. This means that their synaptic communication becomes easier and stricter. Consequently, in the future, it will be easier for neuron A to activate neuron B. In sum, our memories are the patterns of activation of specific neurons elicited by stronger connectivity between them. As an example, do you remember Rudolph the pine tree? He's now stored in your memory. An engram has been created. I literally changed your brain. This video literally changed your brain. Now, in your brain, there is an ensemble of neurons that are more closely connected. They are more likely to activate at the same time and produce a specific pattern of activation. This is the Rudolph the pine tree's engram. You are welcome. By now, the memory is encoded as a memory trace or engram. And, as I mentioned, memory can be divided into three distinct phases. And after encoding comes storage. Storage is the intermediate part between the time a memory trace is created, encoded, and the time when a memory is retrieved, when something is remembered. Although interesting processes happen during storage, I'll leave this part out in order to simplify this exposition. So, after encoding and storing a memory trace, we need to remember it. This is the phase of retrieval. How does this happen? How do we know what memory trace we want to bring to consciousness? There are essentially two main ways to trigger retrieval. One consists on externally elicited processes. Think of Ratatouille scene where, after being served a ratatouille, well, go figure, a food critic is transported and remembers his childhood home when his mother used to cook a similar dish. The other way of triggering retrieval is consciously trying to remember information. And, usually, that information has to be relevant for the present situation. This would be the case when you're doing an exam or trying to remember someone's name. For example, imagine a situation where you awkwardly bump into a person that greets you and proceeds to call you by your name and says you met at a party last week. But, sadly, you really can't remember the person's name. Well, that's cringe. But how does retrieval happen and why does it fail sometimes? It is consensually thought that retrieval derives from cues. More specifically, we search our stored memory traces resorting to cues. The success of the retrieval reflects how much the cues that we use are associated to the target memory trace. Let's consider the previous examples. If we think of Ratatouille's food critic, the taste and the dish itself acted as cues, which were highly associated to his childhood home and mother. Therefore, They were extremely potent cues which easily let him access his memory trace and, in turn, triggered successful retrieval. On the other hand, considering the cringe example of when we can't remember a person's name, a number of cues were available, such as the person's face and voice and the situation when they met. These cues could have triggered retrieval as they were probably associated to the person's name. However, it is very likely that you met more people at the same party and that those memories are interfering with your ability to recall a specific person's name. This happens when the retrieval cues are associated to multiple memory traces, which, in turn, interfere with the ability to retrieve the specific trace you are looking for. Final example. If I say Rudolph the pine tree, what comes to mind? Do you remember how he looked like? If you do, congrats, you just successfully retrieved a memory from an associated retrieval cue, a simple name. Well, concluding this part, retrieval is a necessary part of memory. As we've seen, it is not enough to learn something, we need to be able to retrieve it from storage, or else it is as if it doesn't exist. Retrieval is based on associated cues. The more cues and more associated to the memory trace, the better. However, if these cues are highly associated to other traces, that could and does disrupt the recall process. So, this is a memory. First, memories are encoded in the brain through changes in the connectivity of neurons and synapses. Neurons that are activated together tend to be more connected and communicate more easily. Ensembles of neurons that activate together due to higher synaptic connectivity create specific patterns of activation. This is the physical part of memories, the engram. This is the basis of memory formation and encoding. Then, memories are stored until we try to remember them. We do that by using cues in order to find the information we are looking for. However, this is not always a smooth process, as we are prone to suffer interference through other associated memory traces. So, now you know what a memory is, from encoding to retrieval. Hope I could help you better understand one of your most important cognitive processes. Memories are a central part of who we are, and although we usually think of memories as being in the past, this could not be further from the truth. Every time something is remembered, that something is brought to the present. Memories, as they are reactivated in our brain, gain a physicality and exist now. This, to me, is one of the most fascinating things about memory. Not that they were a part of us, but that, in a very real sense, they are a part of us now. Memories are our past and our present, and they help guide us into our future. They are both our anchors and our compasses. Okay, now some quick tips. Do you still remember his name? Well, good. I used Rudolph again to showcase the first tip, test instead of studying. There's a very reliable piece of empirical data called the testing effect that shows people tend to remember information better after being tested on it, rather than when they restudy it multiple times, especially when given feedback on their answers. This could be explained due to effortful processing, because trying to remember something takes more cognitive effort than simply reading it. This, in turn, could lead to the creation of stronger associations between the memory trace and retrieval cues, which is super important, as you now know. So, when studying for a test or an exam, include some questions and mock tests on your preparation. This is probably why you will remember Rudolph so well, because I have tested your knowledge on him sometimes, instead of just showing him to you. Second tip, study in similar conditions to the ones you will need to recall the information. A group of researchers took this to extremes. Maybe you've heard that chewing gum helps memory. Well, that is actually true and exactly what these guys studied. However, you need to do it both at the time of encoding and retrieval. As you can see in this graph, when participants chewed gum at both stages, they recalled significantly more words than all the others. This happens exactly because of what I just mentioned. A tip for memory, try to study or encode in a most similar environment to the one you'll be tested on, and please chew some gum. Hope you enjoyed this Psychology of Everything video, and I hope to see you soon. Take care.